This presentation will address the benefits of a complete and thorough search, guidelines as to what constitutes a complete search, how to identify what the searcher should be looking for in the search, formulating where the searcher should look, and which tools the searcher should use for that search, and finally, how to evaluate the search results. Making a complete and thorough search makes it more likely that the best references will be located. Further, it is much easier to write a good rejection with good references than it is with poor or mediocre ones. And finally, it is less likely that unpatentable claims will be allowed if the best references have been located and considered. For a speedy and proper determination on patentability, it is essential that a careful and comprehensive search be performed. The art should preferably be commensurate with the limitations of the most detailed claims under examination, and should cover all subject matter which the examiner reasonably anticipates might be incorporated into applicant's amendment. That way, the only additional searching needed for subsequent office actions would be limited to merely updating the original search. Generally speaking, good references equate to good office actions. Good references are references that are relevant to the claimed invention as well as the disclosed invention. Good references are those that can be mapped to claim elements as well as those that can be mapped to elements of the disclosure. The better the references map to the claimed and disclosed invention, the easier it will be to defend the rejection. In order for a search to be complete, all the most likely places should be searched. Generally, a search should include the following three reference sources: domestic patent documents, including both issued patents and published applications, foreign patent documents, and non-patent literature, or NPL. All three sources must be searched unless the examiner justifies with a reasonable certainty that no references more pertinent than those already identified are likely to be found in the sources not searched. A proper search should include looking at domestic and foreign patents and applications filed by the inventors or assignees of the application being examined, and for continuing applications, the prior art cited in the parent applications should be reviewed. To assist in identifying documents related to the application under examination, the searcher should determine who the inventors and assignees are and if any related or co-pending applications exist. Such documents are often identified in the background section of the application and are also often provided by the applicant in the Information Disclosure Statement, IDS. The inventors' names can be used to search for other patent documents, non-patent publications, and/or dissertations that may be pertinent to the application being examined. The Patent Application Location and Monitoring System, or PALM, features an inventor name search, which you can use to search for each inventor's domestic patents and applications. Enter at least the first few letters of the inventor's last name, and if needed, enter the first few letters of the inventor's first name to narrow the results. Knowing the identity of the assignee may suggest related products that can be searched in association with a particular company or entity. It may also be useful in identifying when issues may arise under 35 U.S.C. 102b 2c in AIA applications or under 35 U.S.C. 103c in pre-AIA applications. These issues will be addressed in a later presentation. This image shows the Patent Assignment Query menu in PALM. It can be used to find the current and previous assignees, if any, of any U.S. patent or application. Additionally, an assignee's name may be entered, and PALM will return a list of application numbers currently assigned to that entity. Often the applications being examined will be improvements upon are otherwise related to earlier work by the same inventors or applicants. Therefore, it is likely that references cited in the examination process of the preceding invention will be pertinent to the application under review. Further, the classification and search strategy applied in the related applications may also provide useful insight. Additionally, since the application under examination is likely similar to the preceding application, there may be issues of double patenting between the applications. The initial in-depth search required for a first action on the merits should be sufficiently thorough that there is no need to do a subsequent in-depth search for subsequent actions unless necessitated by amendment. Ideally, for any subsequent action, only an update search will need to be done in order to consider original references that were not available at the time of the initial search. The initial search should always include the inventive concept towards which the claims appear directed, an idea that will be discussed further in the next 2 slides. In any search, the examiner must be sure to give the claims their broadest reasonable interpretation. He or she must identify what elements are being claimed, and also which elements are not required for all of the claims. It is often helpful to diagram or sketch the independent claims to better understand their breadth or scope. You will see an example of a claim diagram later in this presentation. In addition to the claimed subject matter, a complete search should also cover disclosed features which might be reasonably expected to be added to the claims in the future. These features are often closely related to how the invention attempts to solve the problem identified in the application. Searching well is something that has to be learned. Further, to be a good searcher, there are a number of different techniques with which you'll need to be familiar. Knowing when to mix or switch techniques is something that is learned from experience. To that end, each of the techniques listed here will be discussed briefly in this presentation. There are any number of ways to plan a search. This presentation will walk you through one possible way to plan a search using a hypothetical mousetrap application. First, we will identify the problem that applicant is addressing. Next, we'll identify the features of the invention that solve this problem, remembering to include all the features that are claimed and any additional features which may only be disclosed. We'll then construct a sentence or two that relate to these features, and finally, we'll use those sentences to guide our classification and text searches. In this example, the applicant's specification identifies 3 specific problems. The first is that other traps catch only one animal at a time. Once a single animal is caught, the trap stops working. The second problem is that other traps must be periodically emptied and reset, requiring regular monitoring. Thus, they cannot be left unattended for any prolonged period of time. The third problem to be solved is that other traps are specialized to the point that they catch only one type of animal, either mice or cockroaches, but not both. The next step is to identify the features disclosed for solving the noted problems. In this particular application, the applicant discloses a trap with infrared sensors that detect the presence of rodents and insects approaching the bait, and in response, open a pair of trap doors to move the rodents and/or insects into a detention compartment. The application also discloses a solution that tracks and displays the total number of rodents and insects collected in the detention compartment so that the operator can decide when the trap needs to be emptied, and a gated detention compartment to make it easy for the operator to empty and reuse the trap. Having analyzed the specific solutions, pick out the features that are explicitly directed to those solutions. Regarding the first solution, the applicant discloses a trap that includes a first trap door that can be pivotally turned from a horizontal position to a vertical position. Once a rodent has crossed the infrared sensors, the first trap door is pivoted to confine the rodent to an upper space in the trapping device. The disclosed solution also includes a second trap door that is also turned from a horizontal position to a vertical position to move the rodent into the lower portion of the trapping device. While all of this is disclosed, a searcher must determine which, if any, of these features are actually being claimed. Also in this hypothetical application, the applicant describes a rodent trap that utilizes an infrared sensor detection system with a display to give an accurate record of the number of rodents contained within the collection system. Finally, the applicant also describes a detention compartment with a gate to allow for the removal of trapped rodents and insects. As before, the searcher must determine which, if any, of these disclosed features are actually being claimed. Now that we have identified the claimed features, we can construct a sentence or two describing these features. The next 3 slides present some possible sentences for the hypothetical mousetrap application and will be followed by an example of claim diagramming. Note that while these 2 approaches differ in the way they present the information, they typically convey some of the same basic information. Searchers may also choose to use a combination of these 2 techniques. Take a few moments to read these sentences, pausing the audio if needed. Notice that in the first sentence, the searcher has identified the significant structure that forms the invention, namely trap doors, plural. As such, the sentence also includes a number of possible synonyms as might be used in a text search, namely dual, double, and a plurality. In the second sentence, the claimed feature is the infrared sensors and their relation to the trap doors of the previous sentence. That is, the sensors trigger or actuate the trap doors. In the third sentence, the searcher has included bait as an important feature of the claimed invention. Take a few moments to read these sentences, pausing the audio if needed. In the first sentence, the searcher is highlighting the claimed counter that counts the number of rodents captured. In the second sentence, this indicates the counter has been disclosed as an electronic counter. While this feature has not been explicitly claimed, this is something that the searcher reasonably believes might be subsequently added to the claims and should therefore be included in the search. Finally, take a moment to read this sentence, pausing the audio if needed. This sentence is directed to the manner in which the information maintained in the electronic counter is conveyed to a user. Many searchers find it useful to use a combination of both claim diagramming and words or sentences to make note of what they should be searching for. Here is a claim diagramming example that records much of the same information that was contained in the sentences we just discussed. This diagram is limited to only what is recited in the first independent claim. For example, the diagram shows a first trapdoor and a second trapdoor, a sensing mechanism, and bait. The interplay between the sensing mechanism and the trapdoors, which was described in the sentences as to trigger or actuate them, is indicated by the directional arrows surrounding the control section. The additional features of infrared sensors, a counter, and a numeric LCD display are found in the dependent claims and therefore are not shown in this example. Note that this presentation covers only the initial planning of a search. For junior examiners, the next step should be to report the case to a supervisor or primary examiner, explaining their understanding of the application and how they propose to search it. The supervisor or primary examiner will then help the junior examiner refine the search strategy. Next, we will discuss classification searching, followed by text searching. The classification search. It is rare that a text search alone or a classified search alone will constitute a thorough search of patent documents. Some combination of text search with other criteria, in particular classification, would be a normal expectation in most technologies. Further, browsing of all the patent documents in one or more classifications is important when it is difficult to express search needs in words. Classification searching is particularly useful because subject matter is collected based on its classification, regardless of specific words or phrases used by the authors. In fact, the searcher does not even need to know what the proper or accepted terms and synonyms are, as all the related art will be grouped together by its classification. A proper field of search normally includes the CPC subgroup and possibly USPC subclass, in which the application would be properly classified. Additional search areas should be prioritized so that the areas most likely to produce relevant prior art are searched first. This slide shows the CPC scheme on the left and the corresponding USPC schedule on the right that might be pertinent to the hypothetical mousetrap application. These are the tools that the searcher should use to determine where a classification-based search should be carried out. Note that a classification search is usually not limited to a single subgroup or subclass, but will include all the relevant areas for which the sought-for subject matter is likely to be found. Further, a searcher should be conversant in the classification criteria used in the scheme or schedule being used, so as to be aware of its strengths, weaknesses, and idiosyncrasies in order to maximize the chances for a successful searching outcome. In any classification search, it is the searcher's responsibility to search for an invention in its classification area as well as in all analogous arts. This will be illustrated in a brief example. However, note that search needs in some technologies are very specialized and can be met only through additional use of specific search tools specially maintained to respond to those needs. Those tools are beyond the scope of this lecture. To search analogous areas effectively, one must have an understanding of the classification theory used to set out the scheme of schedule. One of the very early classification systems used by the Patent Office was based upon industry or trade divisions. For example, the invention shown here consists of a square box or cube with a sealable lid on one face, the cube being supported for rotation on trunnions attached to diagonally opposing edges of the cube and including a crank that allows the cube to be rotated. This particular patent was directed to a butter churn. Cream would be poured into the cube, the lid would be sealed, the crank would be rotated, and the cream would be churned into butter. This invention was classified in Class 31, Dairy, Subclass 18, Working Body Churns. Similarly, the invention shown here consists of a square box or cube with a sealable lid on one face, the cube being supported for rotation on trunnions attached to diagonally opposing edges of the cube and including a crank that allows the cube to be rotated. This particular patent was directed to a washing machine. The cube was filled with water, soap flakes, and dirty laundry. The lid would be sealed, the crank would be rotated, and the soiled clothes would be washed. This invention was classified in Class 68, Laundry, Subclass 18, Washing Machines, Cylinder. Similarly, the invention shown here consists of a square box, or cube, with a sealable lid on one face, the cube being supported for rotation on trunnions attached to diagonally opposing edges of the cube and including a crank that allows the cube to be rotated. This particular patent was directed to a mixer. The cube was filled with whatever materials were to be mixed, such as Portland cement, slaked lime, and water. The lid would be sealed, the crank would be rotated, and the materials would be mixed. This invention was classified in Class 83, Mills, Subclass 73, Mortar Mixes. Suppose an application for a rust remover is presented. The rust remover consists of a square box or cube with a sealable lid on one face, the cube being supported for rotation on trunnions attached to diagonally opposing edges of the cube, and including a motor and pulley system that allows the cube to be rotated. But for being motorized, the claimed structure is identical to the structure of the previously claimed churn, washing machine, and mortar mixer. To use the rust remover, the cube is filled with an appropriate abrasive media along with the articles to be cleaned. The lid is sealed, the motor is started, cube rotates, and the media removes the rust from the articles. With the classification system as previously discussed, this rust remover should be searched in the classification area for rust removal, as well as the working body churns area in Class 31, Subclass 18, the washing machine's cylinder area in Class 68, Subclass 18, the mortar mixers area in Class 83, Subclass 73, and any other areas where the searcher might know of the structure being employed. As an aside, the U.S. patent classification was reorganized so that rather than being classified by industry or trade areas, apparatuses were classified based on their proximate function. This resulted in all three of the rotating cube patents discussed previously being classified in the same subclass directed to the function of agitating. This example shows how knowing where to perform a classified search requires a thorough understanding of the classification system being used. To assist searchers in understanding the classification system, in addition to the CPC scheme pages and the USPC schedule pages, there are also definition pages that give additional guidance and instruction regarding the classification system. This slide shows a portion of the definition pages of CPC Main Group G08B and USPC Class 340, both of which are search areas dedicated to the use of sensors to detect an intruder or wild animal. Note that both of these examples indicate where some of the more analogous art may be classified. For example, the entry for CPC G08B 13/183 indicates that when considering interruption of a radiation beam or barrier, the searcher should also consider F16P 3/14, where industrial safety devices with photocells are classified. Similarly, the entry for USPC Class 340, Subclass 573.2, where subject matter directed to detecting wild animals is classified, indicates Class 43 should be considered for fishing, trapping, and vermin destroying. Next, we will turn our attention to generating a text search strategy. When generating a text search strategy, the searcher should create a list of search terms to be searched. These terms may come directly from the description or claims, from the sentences that were created describing the inventive concept, from other relevant prior art, for example, prior art submitted by the applicant or discovered in related applications, or from the searcher's own technical knowledge. Once the list of text search terms has been made, then the searcher should add synonyms, related phrases, and searchable acronyms to the list. Then, the searcher should consider which proximity operators should be used with which terms, and what level of proximity might be appropriate. The searcher should not worry about getting it perfect at this stage, as searching is an iterative process. This is basically a search outline. The synonyms considered should include words that have the same or nearly the same meaning, specific examples, or species of broad or generic terms, broad or generic terms of specific words, phrases, hyphenated terms, abbreviations, and so on. Examples are shown for the hypothetical mousetrap application. Note that the list of synonyms should include singular and plural forms and alternate spellings, especially of compound words and terms that are sometimes hyphenated. There are probably a number of additional terms that the searcher might want to include as well. In addition to plurals and alternate spellings, the searcher should also consider different tenses, such as to trap, traps, trapped, and trapping. The searcher should be aware of the search engine's truncation and wildcard functions to assist in applying such variations. Syntax is important when entering words and concepts into the search engine. The syntax shown on this slide is that of the BRS system used by the USPTO's search tool known as EAST. BRS allows the adjacent, near, with, and same proximity operators. BRS also provides the AND, NOT, exclusive OR, and, OR, Boolean operators. The order shown in the slide represents their order of operation in BRS. Also on this slide, truncation in BRS syntax is shown using the $ symbol. Other BRS truncation operators can be invoked using the question mark and the exclamation point. The details of the BRS search system are beyond the scope of this presentation. Nevertheless, synonyms are generally searched using the OR operator, as shown in the L1 and L2 searches. Different but required concepts are then searched using AND or proximity operators, as shown in the search strings that combine the L1 and L2 result sets. The different combinations will generate different results, and some will be more useful than others. The searcher will iteratively tweak search strings on a trial and error basis until satisfactory results are found. Good text searching skills are built over time through experience. As an initial text searching consideration, there are two basic approaches. One is to start out searching narrowly and gradually broadening the search. Alternatively, a search can start out very broad and then be sliced narrower and narrower. We will discuss each approach further in the next few slides. Looking at the narrow to broad searching approach, an extremely narrow initial search is often referred to as the home run search technique. The search string focuses on the exact requirements of the claim being searched. Such searches may be fruitful in technology areas with well-established buzzwords and technical jargon, and may find relevant prior art quickly. However, such searches are not sufficiently comprehensive and have a low probability of success. An example of a home run search for the hypothetical mousetrap application might focus exclusively on using sensors to actuate trap doors, confine mice and cockroaches in a lower detention chamber. On the other hand, a broad to narrow strategy would include basic, generic concepts or ideas associated with the invention. This strategy is likely to return results from applicants' field of endeavor and many analogous areas as well. Then the searcher can selectively narrow the search to refine the results by requiring additional details, closer proximities, and so on. An advantage of this technique is that the search is comprehensive and wide-ranging. Disadvantage is that it will often result in very large result sets that cannot be easily parsed further. A broad to narrow search for the hypothetical mousetrap case might search for traps for other species of animals, or perhaps just generic animal traps. There may well be elephant traps that disclose some of the structural features needed for the mouse and cockroach trap. Regardless of whether a search is begun as a narrow to broad search, a broad to narrow search, or a hybrid, there are a number of secondary search techniques. The strategies addressed in this presentation are flexible combinations, problem-solved, and classification text mixes. Flexible combinations is based on keeping each separate concept as an individual L number. The L numbers, representing the different ideas, can then be flexibly mixed and matched, or sifted with different levels of proximity. The advantages are that it is easy to make the different combinations. The disadvantages are it may be difficult to keep track of the differences between the resulting combinations, since rather than identifying the concepts by text, they are just differentiated by the L number. Also, there may be large numbers of different permutations that can be chosen. The problem-solved technique focuses on searching terminology related to the environment or the problem to be solved. This technique may be useful when the claimed solution is difficult to express in language. When the solution is abstract, or when the problem or environment is very specific. Disadvantages are that it does not focus on structure and can be hard to maintain directionality of the search. The classification text combination strategy is one that should be used only in very limited circumstances where large data sets cannot be narrowed by any other means. The advantage is that it can easily reduce very large search results to reasonable numbers. The disadvantages, however, are significant. First, it is not applicable to searches that include documents that do not have full text, and the applicability is limited in the United States Optical Character Recognition USOCR file because of the poor quality of the text. Additionally, relevant references that would be identified only by text will be eliminated from the results by the classification requirement, and relevant references that would have been found by virtue of their classification only will be eliminated from the results because the references do not include specific terminology. Suppose that this graphic represents the distribution of relevant references for the previously discussed rust remover. The rust remover is properly classed in Class 4, which encompasses agitation. A proper classification search should therefore include Class 4. The area in the blue box represents all the prior art in Class 4. If a text search were to be done without classification constraints, it would return relevant art across all classes. In this example, the text search includes terms for a square box or cube, a sealable lid on one face, and the cube being supported for rotation on trunnions attached to diagonally opposing edges of the cube. To help find known analogous art, the search also includes the search requirement rust remover, or churn, or washing machine, or mortar mixer. The area in the yellow horizontal box represents the results of the text search. The text search should therefore find the churn, washing machine, and mortar mixer patents discussed earlier. As previously discussed, each of those patents have been classified together based on the proximate function of agitation. Therefore, all three of those patents would be found within the intersection shaded in green. Thus, the text search terms previously mentioned, combined with the classification search of agitation, would have provided some relevant prior art. But is it necessarily the best art? It is possible that a fully anticipatory reference exists that would have been located by a text search, but would not have been within the green shaded area. For example, it may be that an anticipatory reference exists in Class 6, which might be the class dealing with motors and pulleys. The anticipatory reference may have disclosed the improvement of adding a motor and pulley to a crank-driven butter churn with all the other required features. Because it includes the terms directed to the cube structure and the term churn, this document would be found within the yellow box. However, because it was classified based on the motor and pulley combination rather than agitation, it would not be found within the blue box. Similarly, it is also possible that another fully anticipatory reference exists that would have been located by a classified search, but would not have been within the green shaded area. For example, it may be that an anticipatory reference exists in Class 4 that discloses the claimed invention, including all of the discussed features, but that has been described as a rock tumbler. Because the rock tumbler functions to agitate the rocks so as to polish them, it would have been found within the blue box. However, because the initial search did not include the term rock tumbler, it would not be found in the yellow box. From this example, it can be seen that when combining text limitations with classification limitations, the best art might be excluded. That is why this technique should be used sparingly, and only when there are no other reasonable ways of reducing an answer set. Another way of looking at this is that classification searches have the advantage of finding relevant and related art when properly classified, even if the searcher is not aware of all the synonyms in use at the time. By limiting a classified search with text, the results will only include results that conform with the language that was searched. Conversely, text searches have the advantage of searching for the given text across the entire database, regardless of where the individual documents have been classified. Limiting a text search with classification will only yield results that conform with the classification we have selected. Thus, combining text and classification significantly diminishes the advantages of each. Having said that, search resources are always limited by time, scope, and skill, among other things. There will almost always be some anticipatory or other extremely relevant prior art that will be difficult to find no matter what. The searcher must also search in the most likely places using the most likely terminology. There is no way that the entire universe can be searched. It's important to recognize that searching is a dynamic and iterative process. Even though you may start with an outline, you should be flexible and adapt based on the received results. Many times, pertinent references will not be found on the first attempt, and you will need to adjust the direction or scope of the search. As you search, a classified search will likely suggest new text searches as you discover other synonyms and jargon that you had not been aware of previously. Conversely, the results of a text search may similarly suggest additional relevant classified searches, and through that process, the searcher gains additional insight into both the classification system and the language of the invention. Further, a search done today is not necessarily the best search for the exact same concept in the future, as the relevant language is continually evolving. Next, we will turn our attention to the tools available for searching. Almost as important in choosing which search strategies to use is the selection of where to search. This choice is best based on the searcher's knowledge of the coverage, strengths, and weaknesses of the various available search tools. In fact, the choice of database should be a major consideration for deciding which search strategy to apply, as some strategies work better in certain databases than in others. A search in the patent databases using East or West will almost always be required. However, there are many additional databases available that should always be considered. For example, in some art areas, there is more prior art available in the non-patent literature than there is in the patent sphere. Thus, USPTO has subscriptions to commercial databases such as ProQuest Dialog, STN, Sightseer, IEEE Explore, InSpec, and others. There are also a number of free internet-based databases and search engines available, such as the Wayback Machine, Google, Yahoo, and others. The Scientific and Technical Information Center and Electronic Information Center, more commonly known as STIC and EIC, can provide one-on-one assistance with PLUS, NPL, and dialogue searches, plus translations of foreign references and books located in our library, as well as other libraries via interlibrary loan. Each of the many search tools available to examiners at the USPTO have different advantages, disadvantages, and search syntax. Therefore, examiners are encouraged to use the services of search experts to improve search efficiency and results. Also, searchers should remember to consult the classification schedules, definitions, and search notes as necessary to improve search efficiency and results. Time available for searching is limited. Therefore, the searcher should periodically evaluate the results they are getting, and if the results are not commensurate with expectations, the searcher should seek additional help. Some sources of search help include supervisors, trainers, primary examiners, search strategy experts, EIC searchers, and in some TCs, the search consultant. Throughout the searcher should make notes along the way, indicating why certain references were thought to be interesting. There are a number of tools available for taking notes, including typing notes in a word processor, such as Word or Notepad, handwriting notes on paper, or printing out and annotating pages from the references themselves.